All right, we have a super special guest on a very special episode. That's right, the president of the UPA, that's MLP and PPA's parent company, Jason Aspes, coming on to answer all of the hard questions that you know K-Dubs and I asked him.
Yeah, so, line calls are coming. So cameras on lines are coming. I agree that one great governing body is all you need. Unfortunately, I don't think we have one great governing body. Look, we just see that this even what we have right now, still not good enough. We need to do better.
We're also going to be catching up
on all things we've done this week, which is a world tour of California. And yes, I realize that's an oxymoron.
We are also going to be talking Gamma versus Groovin. Why did I leave, and how do pros make that tough decision on how to select a paddle company?
That and more. This is pod number 43. Are you with me?
Love that. Let's go.
You tune in now to this pickleball life. I'm K-Dubs and Jilly B is my wife. She's the pro and I've got the filler. She's sweet to me, but on the court she's a killer. Unadulterated and efficiently bringing you the best and worst things in PP. Tell your friends and stay for another. And no one loves us more than your mother. One thing's for sure, one hit and you're addicted. Grab a pile, grab a court, don't resist it. So click subscribe, let's go, let's get cracking. Theme song done, let's go, let's get laughing. This pickleball life.
I hope everyone's not super sick of paddles because I think this is just so fascinating. But I think JOOLA is suing USA Pickleball. I think I've done some preliminary numbers. I've gut checked this with a few people. If you guys have heard differently, let me know. But I think this is like a $20 to $30 million hit.
Yeah, if you imagine the paddles that they have sold and the paddles they would sell and their retail value, that's going to be like 25 to 50 million. If you imagine their cost per paddle of the paddles that they initially produced, that might be more like 3 to 5 million. So the other sticky part we talked about was that they've already paid out affiliate codes.
Oh yeah,
retailers. Now you have to backtrack taxes and shipping.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about paying an affiliate, right? Like, or let's say Tyson gets to make $2 per paddle sold of the Magnus. Like, that check's already been cut to the pro players, to the affiliates. Like, they're not going to be able to undo that. And then Pickleball Superstore and all these e-retailers are going to have to pay for shipping for their customers who are returning. And then they're going to have to unwind all the taxes.
I wonder if they'll just say, like, send us a video of you throwing your paddle in a bonfire. Yeah, that would be way cheaper than shipping.
No, you know why they can't do that? They have to then send it to JOOLA to get their refund. So think about that. So the player has to send it in to the e-retailer. The e-retailer only gets their wholesale cost back, whatever that is, $130. They only get that back once they then send the paddle to JOOLA.
Yeah, that seems like a bureaucratic shipping nightmare cluster.
So the question is, does USA Pickleball even survive this?
Right. We think JOOLA will survive because they already have a flourishing ping pong business, table tennis, depending on who you ask, and other products. It seems like the simplest thing is for JOOLA to, you know, like I said, like make it simpler and not have these loopholes. But obviously they want the loopholes to have the fewest number of refunds. One other, in case you missed it, paddle related, is Rombus has also had a paddle delisted. So I was thinking that we might see the USAP's position on the Gen 3 really stand behind this clerical error. They did resubmit the paddle and it was still unapproved. But now Rombus has had a paddle delisted. So
for what reason?
We're definitely going to
this is what's tough. For what reasons? Because there's no power test, there's no velocity test, there's no deflection test. So what is the reason?
What Rombus itself said was the Ripple, the name of the paddle, was set to become the most powerful paddle on the market due to its unique internal structure and proprietary materials. So, you know, are they going to claim some kind of materials were used that are against the rules? I think, like we keep saying, we're going to start seeing these rules get more buttoned down and figure out what a pickleball paddle really is allowed to be.
But I've never heard of buttoned down. What's buttoned down?
It's kind of like slow up. My dad always used to say that. You're like, am I slowing up or am I slowing down?
Okay.
Buttoned down, buttoned up. It's when you do the top button before and then you go this way towards the belly button. All very interesting. And seemingly Gearbox is in the clear because they didn't have an administrative error in the way that they got approved. So we still are unclear on what exactly is wrong with the Gen 3s. But let's just all hope that this is, like we said, the asterisk era, and it ends quickly with a accurate velocity test, and we can all just move on with our life, being able to, defend from the midcourt. Sounds too good to be true. Do you want to read Andrei's statement?
I wanted to read one thing from, let's read Andrei's statement, and then I want to read something really, really funny from Memes of Pickleball. So go ahead with Andrei's statement.
Andrei says, I'm pained by the recent events. This was an unfortunate mishap. I would, all caps, never cheat. There was no intent to use the paddle in question during competition. It was mistakenly submitted for testing. The paddle has never been used in competition. The UPA has rules and policies. Paddle testing is the player's responsibility. I will abide by their decision.
Wow.
So, yeah, two things to unpack. One, if there's no intent to use the paddle during competition, like, how did it even get on the plane with you? That's, I think, what most people would be wondering. He was training with it.
Had his training partners training with it to create a stronger training partner.
And from what we've heard, this paddle was like so obviously different in stickiness or whatever effect that it's like so hard to believe Andrei would ever think he would get away with it. He probably didn't think he would get away with it.
Yeah.
Like, that does kind of make sense that you're like, how did that get in there? But what was your take?
Well, I just think Memes of Pickleball nailed it. If you're not following Memes of Pickleball on Instagram, you're really missing out. There's a cartoon. Okay, everyone, what are we going to use the $50,000 from Andrei Daescu's fine for? One person volunteers, signing up more washed up former tennis players. Another volunteers, a new car for Anna Lee. And another volunteers, replay cameras, ? Love you, Memes of Pickleball. Never change.
So spot on. I did want to also touch on a couple things I saw on Twitter. I purchased 2 JOOLA Gen 3 paddles. If not refunded for these purchases, it will be the last dollar JOOLA ever sees from me, which begs to the damages, right?
Yeah.
Like, is the reputation so damaged after this that people are mad at them and don't even want to try their future paddles?
Of course.
And how do you measure that? And then someone else wrote, I'm buying new ones on eBay. The ones that come out later won't be as good. And
True.
And how much of that will we see? Like, these people don't want their refund. They just want to go out to the park and slam balls at their friends' faces. All right, pod listeners, our guest today is a Florida Gator, an Atlanta resident, has a background in not only tech, but hotels, and is also a huge pickleball insider, the co-founder of the Kitchen Pickleball Community, a 4.379 doubles duper, and newly appointed as the president of the UPA, the holding company of MLP and PPA. Please welcome to the pod, Jason Aspes. Am I saying that correctly? Aspes?
Aspes, you got right. The 4.37 duper feels a little low, but I understand.
We all go through our ups and downs, right?
I guess so. It feels like it's just staying down.
Too bad you're not president of Duper, too.
Say that again?
Too bad you're not president of Duper, too.
I know. I've had these conversations with Tito. There's got to be some kind of jailbreak.
Yes. Speaking of Duper, we have known you for what, 4 years now? And you seemingly were in pickleball as long or longer than us. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in pickleball.
Yeah,
and
so
then
I think
get into the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, I think like so many people during the pandemic, I was looking for something else to do. I was a basketball guy, and when COVID hit, no one wanted to go and play basketball in gyms, so we went outside and started playing some tennis. I was never going to be a great tennis player. I that writing was on the wall, but I saw pickleball and it looked like a lot of fun. And a buddy of mine convinced me to come out, and we started playing, and I instantly became just fascinated with it. I love the idea of it being this, it was white space as far as I could tell. It was I'm like a strategy guy. I like trying to figure things out, and this was wide open, and I felt like this hasn't been fully baked yet. Let's figure this out.
Yeah, I wonder if there's like an entrepreneurial tech spirit in pickleball, because you and Jill share that.
For sure.
That wanting to figure out the puzzle, the strategy, right?
Do you play poker, by the way?
Jill counts cards.
Yeah, I grew up playing bridge, gin, bridge,
gin,
hearts.
Yep.
Gin, bridge. Sorry, I'm suffering from a little vertigo right now. I don't know from what, but yes, grew up playing cards, counting cards, but not poker. A little bit of 5-card.
Okay. When I first met Jill, I knew she was into bridge and tennis, formerly at some point in her life, and I was like, "Oh, teach me," and she's like, "No, you don't want to learn either." But love the fact that you actually have a true organic pickleball background. I feel like in our sport, we have a lot of pickleball players and we have a lot of executives, and there's a weird like lack of crossover in a lot of the leaders of our sport. So I'm happy to see someone rise to a leadership role who really has been embedded in the fabric of the sport. But we're gonna get into some of your dreams and plans. But first, just tell our audience what the UPA is and why it exists.
Yeah, so UPA was formed to kind of be the umbrella brand over the top of PPA, MLP, and the UPA Championship. So that is a state championship series to kind of culminate into a world championship for the amateur players. So we've covered, PPA with a professional tour, and we have MLP with a team format. And after that, finally got back together, and those two brands were able to find some peace. We put together the UPA championships and put them all under this umbrella that is UPA.
Okay. So is the UPA on your plate mostly focused on the amateur side, or are you involved in the pro side of PPA and MLP just as much as any of the amateur stuff?
Yeah, it all goes under my purview. I'm really focused on the regulation, the rules, the certification, all that kind of nuts and bolts of it. The leagues themselves have their own, presidents, and they are kind of, managed accordingly. But I'm trying to come in over the top of that and try to, get some cohesion here and try to, make things a little bit simpler and streamlined. And so that's what we're looking at.
Okay. So we will still have Connor Pardo at the head of PPA, and who do we now have at the top of MLP?
Bruce Popko.
Okay.
Yeah, we really have Bryce. I think Bryce is officially the president of PPA. Connor is the president, I believe, of Pickleball Inc. So kind of the bigger umbrella.
So you and Bruce report into Connor.
Me and Bruce and Bryce, yes.
Got it. Okay. A lot of details have been morphed over the past 12 months, of course.
12 hours. 12 hours.
Yeah. I'm gonna read a quote from The Kitchen, which may not be exactly your words, but I think is apropos at the time, being that you are a co-founder. And The Kitchen wrote, "From the outside, it might seem like MLP and PPA merger deal is just two billionaires fighting, but in a way, the soul of the sport is up for grabs. A victor will be crowned because this has now become a zero-sum game. The days of playing nice together and sharing our toys are long gone. When a victor is declared, and it's coming soon, the influence of how the game is played at the highest levels will matriculate down to the parks, the local tournaments, the rec centers, and countless other places to play all over the world. So while you might not care about the professional game of pickleball at the moment, what happens next and how we got here does matter." Does that sound like something you agree with, or did have a part in writing?
Sounds like something I wrote.
What do you have to say now that we have sort of seen some of that come to fruition, and what the game might look like in the future?
I think that
with your leadership,
I think that was accurate. I think that I still believe that to be true. I believe that I think the pro game is important. I think, first of all, I think this is a participatory sport. That's what makes it so magical. And we can get into this in a little bit of the role of the professional game and if it ever becomes a spectator sport. I believe it will, but we're not there yet, but we're well on our way. There's some work to be done, creating narratives, better production, a lot of things that need to be done. But what happens at the top when you are an amateur player and you love this game more than just a casual rec player? But if you're taking it somewhat seriously, you want to enter into some leagues or tournaments, you want to know how to play better. And that part of that is training, part of that is coaching, but you look to the best in the world that play that sport, and that's the professionals. So there is a role there for the everyman who's out there playing, wanting to see strategies, to understand what they need to improve, how the game's played at the highest levels. So yeah, I do believe that what happens on the PPA Tour, on MLP, it matters very much to the rec player playing in the park.
Yeah, no, I think it's early days, right? Like growing up for me in basketball, it was the Michael Jordan era, and then there's the Kobe era, and you have these kids grow up through that and end up being, the Steph Curry who grew up watching those people. We haven't really seen a full generation come through the sport of pickleball looking up to the pros and aiming for becoming the next Ben Johns. It's been, 5 years. So definitely I think that the point of having pro players to idolize and look up to is coming and will become more and more something people talk about and look for. But how do we get the eyeballs? So we've been watching for the last 3 years, certainly, the sport grow, right? From, a couple million to now maybe 30 plus million, depending on who you ask. But it seems like the streaming numbers don't. So what's your take on why that hasn't grown as fast as the sport itself?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think streaming is definitely difficult because you really need to seek it out. It's not something that just comes on your television. I think that for a large demographic that are watching pickleball, they're still going to the TV first. They're turning on the TV, seeing what's on. It might be golf, it might be basketball, it might be whatever it is, but you put it on, you watch it, you flip through a couple of channels and you find something. I think pickleball is a little bit that way. When we put it on Fox last week. We had close to 300,000 people watching. That's pretty good numbers. I mean, that shows that people are I don't even want to say tuning in, but they are watching, right? I mean, when you put it on Fox, they're not leaving. In fact, I know that we went over on time and they kept the match on and sent the MLS game that was supposed to be on at that time over to their app, which is kind of insane if you think about it. A few years ago, that would have never even been a consideration. It would have never been on Fox.
Yeah, the same thing happened on Fox Sports the week prior with Jill and the APP and Cincinnati. They were supposed to cut to college baseball and they kept pickleball on. So at least Fox is supporting pickleball, sees the growth. But in a lot of what we've seen over the past year, APP has been more the tour who has the actual TV time. And it seems like the PPA has doubled down on pickleball TV and their own sort of channel. Is this Fox appearance going to be something we see a lot more of the rest of the year?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know our TV schedule moving forward. I know that there's certainly interest, but I think that, I come from a media background, so I know how a little bit of this works, and certainly they're looking for an audience. We have an affluent audience in pickleball, and it's something new. It's something that's relatable. Everybody, 2 years ago, if you asked people about pickleball, a lot of people had no idea what it was. I know when I would tell people I worked in pickleball, I'd have to explain what pickleball was to a considerable amount of people. Nowadays, when I tell people pickleball, it's like their eyes light up, they lean in, they love pickleball, they know someone who loves pickleball, and it becomes, a point of interest. So that's how I think TV is. When we have it broadcast on a network, people flip through and I can hear the people in living rooms across the country of flipping around and saying, hey, it's pickleball's on. Hey, whoever you're talking to, your kid, your wife, your husband, come on in here. They're playing pickleball. This is the thing that we were just talking about. And all of a sudden it is relatable.
Right. And you've obviously through the kitchen been really at the forefront of promoting and spreading the the media side of pro pickleball, what do you think is the ideal kind of view of pickleball? A lot of people feel like the TV doesn't capture it, but a lot of it feels like if you rewind to MLP number 1, mic'd up players, a camera strung diagonally across the court, midpoint, like really trying to get up close and personal with the players, different camera angles, overhead, like we've gone backwards. Is this just like a white knuckle hold tight for 3 years because someone overspent on players and then we'll actually start spending on the production value? Or what can we expect from the UPA side of things as far as production value?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think things need to make sense, right? We can't
financially.
Correct. I think that you can't overspend what you don't make. You can invest in
Tell that to every tech company in Silicon Valley.
Sure. And a lot fail, right? A lot don't make it, but that's okay because that's a bet on many. If we had 200 pickleball leagues out there, we could, go overspend, get investment and keep on finding out one of them's going to win, right? And 5 will get acquired and the rest of them will be in the graveyard. Unfortunately, we don't have that, that spending power to spend so frivolously. I think that, sure, I remember I was at the first MLP, the C360 cameras and it was amazing. I love that technology. I don't know if it warranted it at the time. We certainly were early days way back then. I could certainly see it. I love the idea of experimenting and trying new things and investing in it. And I know that we are on a path to have better production. But there's so many things that need to be done in the short term to get this sport to where it warrants it. And I think as we do this, it continues to grow. The grassroots part of this game continue to grow. We get more players on board. And therefore a wider audience to see these things when they're ready to be seen.
It seems like, Jason, maybe that production is such a strange place to be cutting costs. You look at the millions of dollars the tours are able to bring in with Fortune 100 sponsors, huge names, and we're still struggling for accurate replay systems for line calls, mics that are too hot or not hot at all, grandstand or court 2 streams that would probably look better on an iPhone. So I think this kind of just leads into an overall question I have about the financial state of UPA in general. You guys raised around $50 million in the merger. You've got around $30 million in player expenses, additional operating costs, staff. You have money coming in, obviously, from sponsors and amateur events, but it's probably a very tight first year for you guys, and you're cutting costs in the form of feeding players at the last MLP. What kind of message does cutting costs around production, around feeding your players send to your vendors, your sponsors, your partners? And do you lose sleep over the financial viability of the organization that you now run?
Yeah, I mean, being fiscally responsible is not something that we're going to be, upset about. Reality is reality. We paid players a ton of money. They made out fantastically. I know even with the cuts that were taken, I think everyone agrees that are the salaries warranting where we are in the sport? I think that we probably all can agree that it feels like we've gotten here quicker than ever anticipated. If you look at the salaries of a WNBA, there's a lot of stuff going on in sport right now. Obviously, you have crazy inflated numbers on the men's side of sports, but on the women's side of sports, it's incredibly low. And here we are in pickleball, this brand new game that is paying out their players, across the board, top 100 making 6 figures. It's pretty remarkable. So yeah, we need to be fiscally responsible, and at the same time, moving towards doing the right things, particularly in broadcast.
So you are basically saying that you don't think if we had player salaries that there would be players making 6 figures this deep into the rankings? Like, clearly there are prize money methodologies, especially once you consider a lot of players get their prize money doubled on a lot of the players on the APP. It's not out of the question to me that a lot of players could be making 100 or 150,000 if you just made the prize money exist there. Now, what obviously Steve's original vision for creating a little bit more of these inflated player salaries, as people like to call them, is a place where you can have a stable life. You can support your family. You can get a loan on a house. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was too altruistic and too short-sighted, but what do you see as like the happy medium? What would have rewritten history? Where should these player salaries be?
I have no problem with how we got here. I mean, it obviously was incredibly messy, but here we are. So there's no point in going back and revisiting how we would have done it. I think that I'm happy for the players. I'm glad everybody has the stability in a solid paycheck and the ability to go get a mortgage. That's great. That's financial stability is kind of the bedrock of this thing. It allows players to not have their other job, their first job. It allows players to focus on the game. We'll see quality of the game improve because of it. Sponsorships come in. We have players that are committed to these tours, and that's something that we need to be able to bank on to be able to monetize it. So that's all good. I'm quite pleased with where we are there. Now we got to go out there and sell against that. That's sponsorships. That's when you talk about whether it should be prize money or should it be salaries. That's up for debate. I think that you would end up having a very small few making a ton of money, and that long tail would be tough to deal with.
Well, for what it's worth, I would sell the $300,000 video boards in exchange for an accurate line call or replay system and lunch for the players. So let me know where I can write that in the suggestion box.
Yeah, so line calls are coming. So cameras on lines are coming. That's already been... That money has been spent and invested, so
that's awesome to hear.
Yeah, so that's going to be here in the next couple of tournaments.
Awesome.
So we're excited about that. I also think we're looking for software solutions to be able to do that on other courts, not just the televised courts. Because really, the truth is, we still haven't figured out a solution. We can do this for the televised courts, but there are courts being played all over the place that don't have the answer. So if you're out on court number 37 playing and there's one official, and a bad call is made, it still happens. Just because it's not on TV doesn't mean it's not happening. So we need to have we have to have solutions to that, and having 6 line judges on every court is not a solution.
So Jason, when I saw you at PPA Atlanta, I think it was a month ago, man, it feels like longer, doesn't it? Welcome to pickleball months, pickleball years. Yeah. You said, sunshine is the best disinfectant, and you wanted to shine light on all things in the UPA and kind of, have this era of transparency and bring more transparency to the entire organization. So what have you disinfected?
What have I disinfected? I don't know if we've disinfected anything. I think I'm still getting my feet underneath me. I told you, at the time, I'd happily come on here once I felt like I was starting to understand the landscape and starting to get there. But certainly, paddles has been my focus. The day that I got announced,
and we're going to talk more about that.
Yeah. The day that I got announced, USAP had removed, decertified the JOOLA paddle. So it was like I stepped right into it. And so,
you're a powerful man.
I don't know if it was me, but certainly we were looking to walk back the power of these paddles, methodically and slowly, and let people have the ability to sunset their equipment and paddles out, because it was a bit unfortunate how we have gotten to this place, but here we are. And so I felt like it was time to do something and, act as quickly as it was responsible to do so. It's obviously gone a lot quicker than I expected it to. Yeah. But here we are. So in terms of, sunlight being the best disinfectant, I am a big proponent of that, and certainly working towards making things more transparent, and that's what we're going to be doing. I don't think we're there just quite yet, because things are still pretty messy. Yeah. But we're getting there, and we're putting some processes in place, and going to have better testing and methodology, certification coming soon. So we're excited about where we're headed with it, and I think it's going to bring clarity to everybody, from the players to the manufacturers and to the fans.
And so were paddles a huge reason you guys wanted to start a governing body? You have Ann Worcester, strategic advisor for Major League Pickleball, at Racket X a couple months ago,
Yep.
3 months ago. And she said, in terms of what I would avoid for pickleball, in tennis, we have 7 governing bodies. So I'm very glad to have one governing body in pickleball. And this is why I'm particularly excited about the PPA and MLP merger, because we can create an even more viable, sustainable, healthy ecosystem for all stakeholders in pickleball, players, venues, manufacturers. Everyone will be better off because of the mergers. So I think here she's actually talking about one governing body being USA Pickleball. And so the video doesn't age well, right? And so for the individuals who think having 2 governing bodies is beyond illogical, what would you say to them? And was there any internal oppositions, like from Ann or others, to creating UPAA? And were paddles kind of a centric component of wanting to start this governing body? So a lot of questions in one.
So first and foremost, yes, paddles were the impetus. I agree that one great governing body is all you need. Unfortunately, I don't think we have one great governing body.
Agree.
Okay, so we have a governing body, and they've done a pretty good job up till this point, right? I think that pickleball was a hobby for the last 40 years, and that was fine. Now big money's running in here, paddle innovations, going through the roof. We're seeing incredible engineering and new materials and all sorts of crazy stuff's happening, and the regulations that were in place were simply not good enough for where paddle technology is going. And that is creating an unfair playing field. It's not only is it not competitive, it's not fun. It becomes dangerous. The ball's moving too fast. We're seeing things that there is no exit velocity number on the USA Pickleball regulations. That's just a huge miss. That's where we should start. And I think from a UPA standpoint, UPAA, the governing body side of this, we have a fresh start. We don't have any, heritage to be encumbered by. We have, a clean slate. We can start wherever we want. We're going to do the research. We're going to find out the best way to move forward. I've been talking a lot to the baseball guys, which, by the way, have multiple governing bodies overseeing the sport. So baseball bat regulation is a very similar, experience to what we're going through now. In 2010 or 2011, they created a thing called BB Core, which was put in by the NCAA. And it was because baseball was just getting too powerful. The bats were too poppy. The scores of games were 25-28. You went to Pepperdine, right? Andy Lopez was over there as coach. Games were going through the roof, and pitchers were in danger. 12 players died in baseball, not NCAA, in baseball from like 1982 to 2012. And so all of a sudden you need to do something. You can't just allow things to get hotter and hotter. And as technology advances, it's not okay to continue to just innovate with no regulation. So NCAA stepped in, created BB Core, then USA Baseball stepped in on top of that and put on the USA Bat certification. You have USSSA. Softball has multiple governing bodies. So it's not something that's unique. Not many sports have one governing body. Most of the professional leagues govern themselves, right? Basketball is not FIBA, it's NBA. MLB is not World Baseball Classic. So you have, there are multiple governing bodies everywhere. Everybody's just looking to control what they can control and do it the way they believe it needs to be done.
Yeah, I think maybe what's unique about pickleball, but maybe I'm wrong here, is you guys are also having a foot in with the amateurs, right? You're running amateur events. So from an amateur perspective, I see the confusion with having these, 2 governing bodies, 2 authorities, 2 separate rules, 2 separate scoring systems, different rally scoring systems.
So let me ask you something.
And I wonder if in those other examples that you mentioned, if they also have a foot in the amateur space.
Yeah, so Little League controls Little League baseball. NCAAs control college baseball. You have different leagues controlling different, parts of the sport. when you go play billiards or ping pong, how do you guys score? Is it you serve 5, I serve 5, or is it ball in hand when you play pool? Everybody's got different rules in every bar or state that you're in, and it's all because there are multiple ways to play. It's no different. I think you'll go out to the pickleball court and say, what are we playing? Playing games to 11, win by 1 or 2? Are we playing rally scoring? Are we playing traditional? I don't see it being a huge issue. I think certainly from the PPA standpoint and MLP, we wanted to make sure that there was a level playing field. Paddles being the most kind of egregious and pressing issue.
So on the topic of a level playing field, and Kristen, I think we should get into paddles since that's what we've moved on. How is it a level playing field for the Gen 3s to be banned and the pro players playing alphas? And please don't tell me that you think they're different.
So players in PPA right now are only playing paddles that are approved by USA Pickleball. So those, what you're calling alphas, are not actually alphas. They're a different prototype that are still approved.
Okay, so we're just looking at a paddle that looks like what the alpha looked like, but isn't the alpha?
Yeah, it doesn't really look like the alpha. I've seen it. There's a red one and a green one.
You're just saying it's like a new, different prototype that's also basically all black and has letters in the corner, and then it seemed like the alpha, but you're saying this is new. I think it's other paddle.
I think it's actually old, and it's not the alpha. It's before the alpha, I believe. But I don't know.
Okay, but we're on the same page that the alpha is also not allowed.
Alphas are not allowed, correct.
That's good to know, I guess, that the alpha is also banned. So you're saying that basically you consider paddles to start with, if they're on the USA Pickleball approved list, you might be able to use them. Then if PPL says they're not off the hilt, then they're
so there's
out.
a layer of testing.
Right now, you're not making special. You don't have a unique list, despite what the PPA website handbook says. There is no PPA list of approved paddles.
Correct. We go off of what is approved by USA Pickleball on the approved list. And then at the pro division, it goes through another battery of tests to make sure they are within our spec, which is a more critical testing than just having the certification.
As it's been since Florida of last year after Nationals.
Yep.
Nothing else has changed.
Correct.
Other than some of the parameters, of course, of the test.
Yeah, exactly. So, and having been in here for a month almost now, look, we just see that this even what we have right now, still not good enough. We need to do better, and we need our own certification, quite honestly, because that sticker is meaning less to me than it has in the past. But we're still sticking with that because with the lack of anything else from our side, I don't have certification ready yet, so I can't put those tests in. Now, everybody that was playing, a Gen 3 2 weeks ago in Atlanta, every one of those passed tests that morning. So we felt good that they were going out and those paddles were within our guidelines. But once they lost certification, it opens up a whole can of worms if we let anything in there that just passes our test. But we are working towards having something.
It kind of sounds like you guys are talking out both sides of your mouth. On one hand, saying you literally just said the certification sticker from USA Pickleball is kind of like meaningless, right? Or it's meaning less and less. Mm-hmm. But kind of in the other side of your mouth, you're also saying, well, because they removed the Gen 3s, we did, and we look to them and their lists by, as a means to how we determine what paddles we allow. Yeah. So it's like, does their list mean something or does it not mean something?
It means that we're going our own direction because I think I can say we have lost faith in that certification being good enough. And in the short term, that's all we have. I don't have anything else. And I'm not prepared to say, hey, it's total Wild West, put anything you want in, and we'll test it the way we've been testing it. We're not at certification grade yet. There's some science that needs to go into that. We're working with some of the best engineers in the world to develop those tests and those criteria. Then we'll be able to circulate that out to the paddle manufacturers, give them time to onboard and sunset paddles that won't make the cut. But there's a process to this, and that's where we are right now. Okay,
so in kind of that vein, you've created an equipment manufacturer advisory board. You've an equipment advisory board, and you've got 7 companies on that, as well as like 8 players.
So the companies are Franklin, Gearbox, Yola, Onyx, Paddletech, Pro XR, Selkirk, Vulcan.
Is that not a conflict of interest to have paddle companies advising on your own board of what should be allowed and not allowed?
They're just an advisory council. They're not making the rules. We're just making sure that we're all, getting buy-in and building consensus on what we're doing isn't way out of line.
Okay, so it's less a board decision-making style and more just like a community
It's
forum.
an advisory council. It's not a voting board in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. When we saw the punishment for Andrei Daescu, to shift a little bit for those of you who need a refresher, Andrei Daescu was basically caught with a paddle that had a foreign substance on it before the MLP in Atlanta. He was fined $50,000 and given a 60-day suspension. How is his failure any different than any other paddle failure? And when have we ever seen a fine or a punishment that great? Is this just a marker of the future of the punishments we might see, or is this a unique outlier?
I do hope that it is something that sends a message that we're serious, that that being fair in play, it matters, that trying to gain an edge through manipulation of a paddle will not be tolerated. There's a big difference between a manufacturing issue where a player has no idea what's inside that paddle, right? If that paddle is, whether it's delaminated, it has too much grit, it has too much pop, that's not something the player can control. They might walk in there with 3 paddles, and if all 3 of those paddles fail, they have to go find more paddles. We're not going to let them go out there and play with those, right? They will be charged additional money for more testing, but they still need to go through that testing. There's a big difference between that and a player manipulating a paddle. And if we find that, we're going to hold them accountable and to the, extent of our abilities to curtail that. And we hope that that does send a message and people, take it seriously and play the game straight up.
So it's your stance that the punishment fit the crime in this case?
I think so. I mean, I think, look, there are grounds of expulsion from the tour and from MLP if we, catch people cheating. So, this is a funny one because it was never used in play. It was identified beforehand. There was a little bit of discrepancy of how it all went down. But I would say that the buck can always be passed, right? Once you put a paddle in for testing, that becomes an official act. And, just because we caught it and it didn't get played with doesn't make it okay. And it's a slippery slope. Particularly if you go after the paddles have been submitted and then go practice and something happens, we really got to be careful about how we monitor that. And we've talked about even potentially not letting players have their paddles in between testing and playing. Think about that. You want to practice with your paddle before a game. So it's a difficult scenario.
Well, and we've kind of evolved from, we're going to do testing in the, I think the round of 16 and the semis, but not the quarters or the finals. We're going to have challenging. Wait, no, you can't challenge. Oh, you can challenge, but you have to challenge during the match. You can't challenge after the match. And now we have no challenges. What has promoted this kind of demotion of the testing, kind of like the production value? We're doing less testing than ever, and you could basically just go out in the sun and beat on your paddle as hard as you can for the next 4 rounds, and it'll pass until you get to the finals.
Well, we're testing.
There's no chance of challenging.
Right. Well, we're testing every day, and you're referring to no challenges.
Once a day, right?
Once a day. Once a day in the morning, you have to, for that day. There are no challenges.
But isn't the whole point that these paddles break down after
like 20 minutes?
an hour,
Well,
2 hours?
They're breaking down
week?
at such a rate that it's almost unfair to the players to be held accountable. We saw it with Sarah Ansbury. Jill, you were there. Same kind of thing. Is that fair? I mean, that was the way we did it at the time. And I remember this case pretty well, that, she was on the borderline. She decided to play, It went over, it got challenged, and you guys were forfeited. That stinks, right? I mean, I feel like we are in a place now where that would be commonplace, and that's not great.
It stinks, but does it stink worse because she's the only person who's ever been punished on a paddle that basically never fails, when we have these companies that every single week we hear of someone showing up at 10 paddles and 8 fail, 5 paddles and 4 fail. And here's Gamma, a company that's basically had 1 failure in their whole history, but they're the only company that's ever been punished.
Yeah.
Does that seem a little weird to anyone besides me?
Well, we stopped doing it.
Is that just the weirdest of coincidences?
Well, we stopped doing it, right? So I mean, that's why you're not seeing it every week now. But that's not good enough anyway. I mean, that's what I say.
You stopped challenges.
Stop challenges, correct. Because I think...
But you've continued testing, and every other company has had way more failures, but only one person's been punished. So you're just saying it's because now it's preemptive and there are no challenges. So no one gets punished except Andrei Daescu.
We're not punishing players because their paddles are failing prior to play. That's manufacturing, and that's something that we need to get better. I mean, I think we all agree that quality control needs to get better. The rules need to be established better, because quite honestly, there are no rules against this stuff. There is no, deflection numbers in USAP. They test at 7 pounds or something like that. We're testing to 42 pounds. There's it doesn't add up. There's no rules on exit velocity. So everything's fair game, but we put some rules on top of the rules, and we're trying our best to make it fair. And I think that it is a process, and we're working towards that being much better.
Yeah. I think that the singling out of Andrei is exactly that. It's a singling out. He's been playing the APP. We were supposed to play together all year on the APP, so thanks for that. Now he can't.
Jill, I can tell you that we've never seen anything like that in a paddle coming into PPL.
Well, I want to say one thing on that topic, because you did say, players shouldn't be punished for something that they can't control. Yeah. What about the players who spent the past year crushing their core with a lacrosse ball? You and I know who's been doing that. And then they put the paddle in for testing. Okay, if that fails, did they cheat? Or they send the paddle in for testing, it passes, they get it back, and they're smashing a lacrosse ball against it to get it to degrade as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Those are top 10 players on the tour. That's equivalent to what Andrei did, maybe worse.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't know if that to be factual or not, but I understand what you're saying, and that needs to be addressed. And we're working to have processes in place where everyone's going to be held accountable, right? So we're going to test. I would love to bring back the challenges. If anything fails at any time, whether it's the player's fault, the manufacturer's fault, you better believe that you are going to trust the player, you're going to trust the manufacturer, because you're both going to be held accountable. We're going to need to build paddles better where they don't degrade to the benefit. And so delamination is exactly that, degradation to the benefit. And if we're going to degrade to the benefit, we're going to have a red line, and you're not going to be able to go over that red line. If it ever crosses that red line from deflection or exit velocity, there will be consequences that are significant.
Yeah, it's a really big problem to imagine at the amateur level, because we don't have PPL testing at every rec play. I was joking last week, I feel like at this point I have to go up and thumb test every paddle I play against, just at least to have assurance that there's no crackle to begin with. But if we have these lines drawn for, if it degrades below X line, I mean, it's not going to protect the rec player.
Well, let me say this. If we hold these paddle manufacturers accountable and we bring the standards up, then these paddles will last longer. When they do degrade, they will not degrade over a certain threshold. And that's what we need to do. We need to get to that point. But right now, you're right. It's the Wild West. And, you know.
So I'm imagining the future test would have to be some kind of almost lacrosse ball replicated sort of test, where it's like, okay, we're gonna try and beat this paddle up to the equivalent of being 6 weeks into play.
Yeah,
and see
it's
if
destructive
it still passes.
testing. That's right. It's destructive testing. We need to understand the life cycle of a paddle and how hot it can get over time, and when it breaks down, when it degrades, how hot it gets.
So Jason, we know that the Gearbox Pro hits as hard, if not harder, than the Gen 3 JOOLA. We know that the Proton paddle has a coefficient of friction in reality that is 4 times greater than the limitations, the published regulations. So are you guys kind of just like waiting to see what USA Pickleball does with those other paddle companies? Or are you taking this into your own hands? Because it feels to me like it's not enough just to ban JOOLA. I mean, you've got other issues.
Just remember, we're not banning JOOLA. JOOLA is no longer certified, and that's the first kind of line of defense that we have from USA Pickleball. Gearbox is still there. Now, if you... I was as outspoken as anybody about paddles getting too hot, and I stand by that. I think it's not good for the game. It's not fun. Our job here is to protect the game, to make sure it's fun, to make sure it's competitive, to make sure it's fair. So, yeah, we definitely expect to walk back the restrictions in terms of exit velocity, something that's not measured currently in USAP's regulations. We're going to look at RPMs, so the spin that a paddle creates on a ball. We're measuring grit right now, but that's not good enough because, as you mentioned, on a paddle like the Diadem Icon or the Proton, those paddles use friction. So that it doesn't do any good to measure the peaks and valleys like we're doing now. It doesn't give you an answer. So we're measuring the wrong things. We've been measuring, material based instead of performance based, and we're going to move those metrics to performance metrics.
Yeah, no, and it's created a situation where, as we talked about last week, the innovations have not been actual innovations, more just like workarounds for the test. And hopefully what we'll start to see is a little bit more parity in the paddles and kind of like I think of it a version of baseball, like you said, where there's like the wooden bats on the pro level and the aluminum bats at the college and below, perhaps is what we'll end up with, you can be a little bit more stringent.
Let me unpack that for a second, because you just mentioned that the innovation's in the testing, not in the paddles. I disagree. I think we've seen incredible innovation in the paddles, and that's one of the things that we want to protect against. We don't want to limit innovation. What we want to limit is the output that these paddles can create. So whether it's power or spin, I'd also say noise matters, right? You can't have a silent paddle. We kind of forget it.
Despite what every HOA country would want.
Well, there's got to be some kind of a limit at the top and a limit at the bottom. Certainly there's a role for quiet paddles, but when you're talking about performance paddles, I think that that's a different conversation. I think that you do need some kind of auditory cues to be able to defend yourself. And there's definitely a correspondence between, how hard a paddle hits and how much noise it makes. So we're looking into that as well. I'd also say that when you talk about baseball bats and the pros using wooden bats and amateurs using metal bats, the metal bats, the BB core bats, which are used at kind of high school and above, all of college, all of high school, BB core is ball bat coefficient of restitution. And what's happening is that we are mimicking wooden bats in the BB core label. So that is a 0.5 coefficient of restitution. That's the formula. A baseball bat, if it comes in 100 miles per hour, it comes out 50 miles per hour. And that's what these metal bats do. They mimic wooden bats. So they're not playing with any more power. The metal bats presumably just last longer, right? So you don't crack your bat every 10th at bat, and parents have to go out and buy another $150 bat. You buy one $400 bat.
So at this point, it's a little bit like a visual for the MLB. They just don't want to see metal bats. They don't want to hear them.
Yeah, it's a 130-year-old league or something, and they've never used metal bats, so they've stuck with what they've always had. But it's not that they hit any harder at the college level. In
theory. And it's probably easier to regulate the wood too.
In science.
That's neither here nor there. But point being that there's some kind of delineation of like, okay, if this is as powerful as a wooden bat can be, we don't want the synthetic bats to ever be more powerful. we could hypothetically see that in pickleball, where it's like, well, if this is as powerful as a wooden paddle is, then we don't want to see pickleball get faster than X times more than that, or some kind of line in the sand where we don't have, as we talked about, the asterisk era of pickleball going on right now, where we look back and go, remember 2024? PEDs gone wild, paddle testing had no regulations. We hadn't figured out velocity testing.
Yeah.
When can you imagine in kind of your minimum a number of months down the road, we might be able to revisit this question with you? What would be your kind of timeline goal for seeing some of this velocity testing come to fruition?
I expect to have it ready for 2025, for the pro game at least.
Okay. All right, we will schedule you for the pod for January.
Sounds good.
Hopefully sooner than that.
Yeah, and we're shooting for sooner than that. I think full certification, January 2025.
What about drug testing?
Yeah, it probably it's something that needs to be looked into, but quite honestly, the paddles are at the front of my agenda, and that's what we're trying to tackle right now, and then we will move on to the next pressing thing.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question that nobody has been able to answer for me.
Okay.
And I have a few like insiders in a few places, you know. Why was there gambling? Where did it go? When will it come back? Can it come back without drug testing and without a replay system that works?
Yeah, so good question. I don't know the full answer to that. It's my understanding that FanDuel is still carrying bets, but maybe I'm misinformed on that.
Yeah, I think they came, they left, they came back, and they're currently in.
Yeah, I think they're currently in. I think I was hearing that last week, but yeah, I mean they've I know there's a limit on how much you can wager, but I think that they are definitely interested, and I think that it's an important part of the sport. I think we need to clean everything up and make sure that we have that fair playing field that I'm talking about. But yeah, that's it's certainly vital. It's one of the levers to growth in pickleball.
Of course. I don't know how we do it without drug testing though.
Yeah,
but,
I think
when I was talking to the APP about this last week, she went, yeah, we're absolutely, Jenny said, we're absolutely intending on getting into this. We have a partner, UTR Sports, that's worked with IMG for their pro tennis tour, but we're not going to do anything until the drug testing policy is in place.
Great. I fully support that.
What do you see, or what is UPA's thoughts on APP's role in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I'll speak on behalf of myself rather than as UPA's official statement, but I like the APP. I think that they serve an incredible role in the sport. From my kitchen days, I would go out every time they came to Atlanta. I'd go check them out. I'd go to a couple of tournaments a year outside of Atlanta from the APP. I always liked seeing. I felt like it was a great place for younger players to make a name for themselves, to kind of scout out from an MLP side of who are the new faces. I think they do a great job with their next gen stuff. I think Ken's built an amazing business over there. So yeah, I think what they do is incredibly relevant. I think that, I think that 4 years ago when I started out in this thing, PPA and APP were fighting it out who was going to be the premier league. I feel like PPA, it's fair to say, has established themselves of having the best talent. But I think that APP has an amazing on-ramping, component to the sport, and people can go over there, can get great reps, can learn how to win. Quite honestly, I think that's really important. I think that's harder to do on the PPA tour because you're facing serious competition at the very get-go.
Well, as of a week ago, there was Andrei Daescu on the tour, and as of 8 weeks ago, Gabe Tardio, Georgia Johnson.
But they're not there anymore. I mean, this. What?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So I mean, fair or not fair, that's the way the game is going, and I don't see that as necessarily a negative. I feel like
and is the plan then every time there's an up and coming really good player, the next JW Johnson, just the UPA goes and signs them. I mean, that feels like financially probably tough to do, but like, is that the game plan?
You're making it sound like the UPA or PPA or it's a one-sided thing. Like we go in and just grab people. I think the best players in the world want to play where the best competition is. So I think it's a two-way street, and I think that if it makes financial sense to do that, then absolutely.
So my last question for you, and maybe the most important, is how do I get unblocked by the PPA on all of their social media channels?
Jill, this is way above my pay grade.
Above?
Way above.
You gotta text Connor Pardo. I heard it all comes from him.
I'd go Bryce.
That would be above, I guess.
Bryce? Okay, I'll shoot Bryce a text. Hey, Bryce, never found out why I got blocked.
Are you trolling them?
Absolutely not. I just guess the truth hurts.
Okay. Whose truth?
There's only one truth.
On that note.
So yeah, on that note, do you have any final words for us or things that you wanted to make sure to promote out to the world via your role at the UPA?
No, I think, look, like I've said it a couple of times on here, our mission here is to keep the game fun, to keep it competitive, keep it fair. And I think that there's a lot of work to be done. I think that, I love this game. I know you guys love this game. And, it's been a messy ride to get to this point over the last 4 years. But I think that, Kristen, as you said at one point, we're in our infancy. And every time I say that, everyone yells at me and says, it's been around since 1965. What are you talking about? I get it. I know the history of the game. But the game in the last 2 years, let's say, has grown up like we've never seen anything on a trajectory that it's on. So a lot of growing pains. It's messy. It's not as perfect and clean and neat as we'd like. But it's amazing if you look back to where we were 2 years ago at any tour stop. You look back at what we had then and what we have now, it's truly remarkable. And we're just going to continue to see that kind of growth. And we need to do it responsibly, financially. We need to look after the health of the players and the fans and the amateur experience. And so we're getting there in production and a lot of things, right? So we're moving the right direction. And I feel really confident that we have a great group of people, but this is a startup, right? This is, it's never, you're seeing all the warts out there, right? There's nowhere to hide stuff. We're being broadcast. We're streaming 4 courts a day. It's a lot. And I know we can do better, and we are going to do better.
Well, appreciate your candor, Jason. I think I agree with everything Kristen said. It's nice to have you at the helm of UPA. I know you've always been a champion for having the best in the sport and being very forthcoming. So appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for coming, Jason. We'll look forward to hearing from you again soon.
You got it. Thank you.
Happy Saturday.
You too.
So everyone, that was Jason Aspes, who I'm so happy to learn it's not Aspes, which is how I've been saying it. No big deal.
I should always remember.
4 years.
However Jill says it, it's probably the other way.
Thank you, Kristen. Love you. So sweet.
No, I've heard you say it both ways. I've heard other people say it both ways. This one is not just you, but I was just realizing the perfect mental note for how to say it properly is as if you're saying Aspen.
Oh my God, just where you're from.
Swap the N for an S.
There you go.
Jason Aspes.
So obviously Jason's media trained.
Just looking at the long line of PPA employees who say the right things.
This is like when I was in corporate sales, and then my potential customers would be like, "You're really good at this." And I was like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing to be called out when you're trying to sell someone for being a good salesperson. It's probably a bad thing. So yeah, no, Jason was good,
Yeah. Well, like I said, we got to reschedule him for 6 months and see what impact he can make. I mean, a month is not long enough to really call anyone out on anything yet.
Can't wait for a couple of events from now, a replay system. Jason,
yeah,
I'm going to be calling you if I don't see that.
In that case, we already know the technology exists. Whereas the velocity testing, we've yet to see that actually, be known or used. So I think we can look to the line call videos soon.
And I think, I want to address when Jason says, well, you're making it sound like we're this, evil entity plucking people away and it's this one-way street. He's totally got a point there, but I do talk to the players all the time, and I know how many signed that didn't want to sign. And I know the Andrei thing is not the full story. Like, we are not getting the full story. He was happy playing the APP, happy having his freedom. Something happened, probably even outside of the paddle scandal and the cheating scandal. There's something additional there that we don't know about that. But there's just something we're missing in terms of why he signed. He didn't want to.
Well, and I don't even think you need
I don't think he wanted to.
Like Andrei secret story example. I just think every pro, not every pro feels exactly the same way for the same reasons, but almost every pro you or I have talked to, and I was just speaking to someone just this week who was like, yeah, I mean, I feel like I got a good deal. I feel like I got as much or more than what I'm worth. I'm not a top 10 pro, but I also feel like they control my life. Like, I feel like they control me, and I feel like most pros are playing more events than they would otherwise play if they didn't have to.
Yeah, it's also possible for a pro to make a decision, and it's two-way at the time, and now they regret it. Like, two things can exist.
Right. Or they're like, yeah, in a parallel universe, I'm 22 and don't have a wife and kid, and I would make a different decision. So, you know, I don't mean to completely paint the PPA into a corner, but it does always make me wonder, like, where would we be if these original 2021 exclusive contracts had not come to be, and it had just been like, let's compete and win for being the tour where the pros want to be. I don't doubt that might not have organically happened for the PPA, but as a result, instead, it's a little bit like indentured servitude.
So we have done a little bit of research, and apparently what the JOOLA pros are playing in Sacramento from just yesterday. We were like, oh, what's Federico playing? What's Brooke Buckner playing? Looks like the Alpha, smells like the Alpha, sounds like the Alpha, but I guess it's a rose by any other names. It's like the CB or the C.
I thought it was called the Rosebud.
Write it down on our potential paddle name list. It's like the pre-Alpha, the pre-prototype.
Yeah. So, I mean, not strange that companies will create several prototypes before deciding one should go to production. And they're apparently saying that this was the proto before the other proto that we call the Alpha. But we watched players in Sacramento, and it did not look like they were hitting very differently than they were
with the Alpha. Yeah,
with the Alpha. So
looks like Anna Bright's playing her old Anna Bright paddle,
Scorpius,
the Gen 2.
Whatever it was called. Yeah.
So you got some of the pros playing the Gen 2, and then others playing what I'm just literally going to keep calling the Alpha, but I guess it's something else.
Meanwhile,
I literally watched Tyson playing like 6 feet from him. I'm like, that's the Alpha. So
yeah.
I the writing's a different color.
The Gen 3s are still for sale inside of Pickleball Central's store at the Sacramento event too. So I thought that was a little interesting. I guess buyers can
buy it now so you can get your refund.
Yeah, on their website it says sold out, but the only place you can get it besides eBay is the Pickleball Central tent at Sacramento.
Amazing. So you guys tell us what questions did we miss with Jason? What do you want to know from the UPA, PPA, MLP? Drop it in the comments or send us an email to thispblife@gmail.com.
Yeah, I'm sure if we text Jason some questions, he'd be happy to fill us in on any more pressing matters. Should we talk about ketone first?
Absolutely. Looking for clarity? Ketone IQ can help you feel sharper, more focused, and ready to take on any task. Visit ketone.com/Jilly B for 30% off your first subscription order and unlock the benefits of drinkable ketones, allowing you to return to an ancient source of energy on demand.
According to PubMed, 87% of people see an improvement in brain network stability after drinking Ketone IQ.
Proven to support endurance and recovery, ketone supplements are trusted by the world's top performers, from Navy SEALs and Tour de France cyclists to pro athletes across major sports.
Ketone IQ ships free inside the U.S., and it's backed by a 60-day money-back guarantee. So ride the ketone wave risk-free at ketone.com/JillyB for 30% off your first order.
And they just came out with a ketone plus caffeine product. Super exciting.
Super exciting. So ketone up.
So you guys, I want to talk briefly about Grooven versus Gamma and how a pro chooses their paddle sponsor. Y'all were so nice. Thank you for the outpouring of support. Thank you to everyone who went and bought balls and bought the Airbender or the Obsidian RCF. I hope you love all the products. Let me know what you think, because obviously I do. And with all the positive comments, of course, we're just so naturally inclined to like remember the one or two that are like, you know, a little
Evolutionary
negative.
biology kicks in. You remember the negative.
So there was a comment that was like, oh, you know, you said all these same things about the move-in paddle. Now, X amount of months later, you know, here you are saying this about Gamma. So I thought it would just be interesting to talk briefly on like how a pro chooses their paddle and kind of like what went into my decision here. So really the only thing that, you know, Grooven and Gamma share is a letter of the alphabet. So let's just be really clear about that. So if I did a paddle review on the Move-In 16X and you bought the Move-In because of that, or the Jilly B 13X, that's great. And if you love those paddles, awesome. You should keep playing those paddles. Don't change to Gamma. Don't change to anything. If you're playing a paddle that you like, that's great.
We've talked to so many people since you've signed for Gamma that are like, oh my God, I love my Grooven. Am I still going to be able to get the Grooven?
Of course, yes.
And, you know, are they going to go out of stock? So
100%. So keep
if
doing
that wasn't
you.
true, then the people we recommended the paddle for would be like, I can't believe you recommended this paddle. We were stoked on it.
Now, with that said, like the paddles are totally different. They're very, very different. I'm not going to talk about on this pod exactly how or why that is, but let's talk about why a pro chooses a paddle company. So first off, you know, the contract's up. If your contract's up, you got to move on. I didn't even.
Well, you don't have to move on, but it creates a moment of renegotiation for your existing company.
So I didn't even try and renegotiate with Grooven. It was a time for me to move on. So for me, Gamma's global. It's an international brand. I have the opportunity to be on packaging at Dick's Sporting Goods, Target, Walmart. Like you almost can't buy that style of opportunity. That's a really big deal. They have a 44-person company. That's, you know, it's not massive, but that's a big company. They have two dedicated engineers. They're based in America, right? Like there's kind of nothing similar to Grooven in terms of like the corporate structure itself. And the company itself and the paddles.
One's based in Vancouver, one's based in Pittsburgh. Very different cities. We're actually excited to head over to Pittsburgh to see the headquarters this week. So we'll have reports back for the next pod on our Pittsburgh trip.
100%.
But really excited to be in the family and to have a company that really gets where the sport is going and supports it.
Yeah, and just putting money and time and effort into just a lot of innovation.
Yeah, and those of you who are out on the courts in California like we do might not see as many Gamma paddles. They're a very East Coast-based company, so we're excited to bring a lot of the Gamma lore into the West Coast. And see more paddles out here in California.
Yep. All right, let's catch up real fast. We just got back late last night. Kristen is an amazing long haul road trip driver. Thank you. You did like 6 of the 8 hours.
I appreciate you appreciating that, but I feel like you did half the driving as much as is necessary. So we have our roles. I get car sick when I don't drive.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm either driving or I'm sleeping.
So we just got back from kind of a whirlwind NorCal trip. We left Monday morning. We did a sold out clinic at Clear Creek in Carson City or Tahoe area.
Such a sick club. It is.
We're going to put some photos up.
Just an amazing place.
They put us up in a cabin.
So good.
Right on the golf course, voted Tahoe's best golf course, although we didn't play.
Yeah, we played in a
basement,
golf? A pickleball with a gym floor pickleball court. Super cool, like buried underneath a house that already existed. Really a big feat of engineering, it sounds like.
So
then
yeah,
we headed to the city for one main and critical role in our lives.
Bread.
Liguria. Some people wait in line for cupcakes. Some people wait in line for movie openings. We wait in line for focaccia.
So you might be wondering what, you know, 2 lesbians without children spend their disposable income on, and the answer is cats and focaccia bread from San Francisco.
We like the jalapeno cheddar, but they have several other amazing flavors. Liguria Bakery, thank you. We got 15 loaves. Maybe 12 would have cut it, but you know, Jill did the wrapping and I did the packing, and we fit them in our freezer. I will have to insert a video of how many pieces of bread that looks like.
So speaking of like roles and relationships, Kristen, we had to like manage going from San Francisco to Sacramento with 15 huge loaves of focaccia bread, and it's like 104 degrees in Sacramento. So it's like, how do we keep this cool for the 3 days we're there till we, get back to our house and can freeze them? So she measured the 15 focaccias cubic inches and sent it to our Airbnb host and asked if we could have that cubic inches of space in her fridge.
Yeah, I was like, I think it's like 24 by 12 by 18, or roughly the size of 5 phone books.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then we went to Sacramento. I played with Travis Rettenmaier, who, by the way, if you don't know Travis, he hosts Tennis Sucks Pod with Graham D'Amico. And by the way, best name ever for a podcast. I thought it was This Pickleball Life. It's not. It's Tennis Sucks. Travis is awesome. Cannot say enough fun things about Travis. He, in fact,
oh my God. Yeah, this is crazy.
Out.
He got stuck in weather in Florida, where he hails from, in the Tampa area, drove to Orlando for better flights, still got delayed, 5 hours on the tarmac?
Standby on an LAX flight, got on it, landed at midnight. Didn't tell you this.
Which is 3 a.m. East Coast.
Had to wait an hour and a half for the rental car.
That makes sense.
And then drove 8 hours to Sacramento from LA.
And I was like, the parking here is a joke. So I don't know if he has parking, but I will valet his car.
So he pulls up,
coffee in hand, pickleball bag, hops out. I take his keys.
I'm like, paddle testing's over there.
45 minutes later, I return to the venue.
Kristen parks his car. I take him to paddle testing. And it's like 9:01. He pulls up. I'm like, okay, we're hitting with Lauren Stratman and Jack Monroe in 19 minutes. He's like, yep, on it.
Gets his paddles tested.
Yeah, it's great. And we played. Oh my gosh, I played
epic battle.
Yeah, we lost to Augiga and Mary Brosh. They played great. I mean, I can't speak for Travis. He's such a gentleman. He was like, oh, I didn't play my best. I wasn't sharp. It's like, well, dude, if you weren't sharp, which I thought he was, but if he thinks he wasn't,
that's his bad
I think
day.
You have an excuse considering your travel here.
God.
But no, I thought I played my absolute floor. I don't know what was going on with me. We came from Tahoe. It was like 7,000 feet. And then got to San Francisco and I was like having vertigo for the first time in my life. And 4 days later, I like still feel it every time I lay down and get up. I just feel so out of it right now. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts at home and you're hearing this and any advice for me. I've like literally never been dizzy and now I'm dizzy all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think give it 3 more days and we'll see. But yeah, it's interesting. I grew up at high altitude and you've come on ski trips a lot. So you'd think this would have happened before.
No, this is like reverse altitude.
So I don't know what the outlier here is. Summertime. I don't know. I was having ear trouble too, so who knows? Maybe it's something.
So I hope Travis and I can run it back. I can't play worse than that, and I really like playing with him. I think
he's a lot like you. Like you're both strategists. You're both like veteran kind of smart players on the court who want to assess their opponents and play the right ways.
I just want to say one thing I really appreciate about guys like Travis. I'll put kind of like Ryler DeHart in this category. Who else is in this category of like, the guys who played pro tennis where like as Travis said, get me to LA, I'll crawl my way to Sacramento. Like, and Ryler said to me before, like, they're not taking me off this court unless it's on a stretcher. Like, I just love those mentalities.
Yeah, they don't make them like that anymore.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, who else is in that category? They did used to play together, so obviously for a reason. They're buddies.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Those were back in the days where I was paying more attention to the brackets with the duper predictions and stuff. So a lot of stuff going on this week, even though you only played just the mixed in Sacramento, but super happy to be home for a few days before we head to Pittsburgh. And then next up will be PPA San Clemente with
my sister, you guys.
Finally.
It's finally happening. It is either going to be the best or we are never speaking again. Like there is nothing in between here, you guys.
Might have room on your October schedule.
I want so badly to mic us up. I don't think there's a rule in the PPA handbook that says you can't be mic'd up, because the commentary between my sister and me during this is going to be
moment.
Priceless. Like the things we're going to say to each other. For those of you that don't know, we have a very, I don't know if it's like a unique relationship or what, but like, I guess the way we speak to each other, other people would be like appalled at, and we think it's funny. Like we're pretty mean to each other, but like loving, but also like, yeah.
Yeah.
We tell it like it is.
Yeah.
How would you explain it?
Yeah. Well, like Natalie's very self-deprecating. Like she'll call herself like lazy and stupid.
She's
a
mean
lot.
to herself.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. It's like all very like, I want to see it, but also I don't know if anyone should see it. You know, it's like detrimental to your mental health.
Yeah. She's hard on herself.
The self-talk out there.
She's hard on herself, and then I'm hard on her.
Maybe knowing that she's mic'd up will be the best inspiration for her to, you know, generate positivity. Don't see that happening.
No, definitely not. No, she's not mean to me. I'm definitely abusive to her.
You said it. She said it. You said it.
But like she would have no problem if I was like, hey, like, you know, can you slow your drive down? Or maybe we should hit more balls to this person. Like she'd have no problem looking at me and going, shut the F up. Like, you know, like.
I can't imagine you saying that on the court like that. It would come out a little different. But yeah, no, I'm really excited to see how that goes.
And I'm also equally excited, almost equally. I mean, you can't be more excited than playing with your sister. But I'm very excited to play with Jack Monroe.
I'm really
that
excited
has
for
been
too.
like in the making
in
for
the works.
Years.
Yeah. So yeah, here we are.
We have a very special guest coming on our next podcast. Wow, so many guests, so little time. Who's going to talk about just a huge array of topics. He is a founder of Pickleball Superstore, an e-retailer. He's a founder in The Hub Pickleball with multiple locations. He has shares of Duper.
He runs the restaurant and the events business at TTC.
A man who's believed in pickleball almost before anyone else, and that is Pat Rolfes. And he's going to talk about all sorts of really interesting stuff on our next podcast.
Yeah, all of those things, and a really, really great friend of ours.
Yep. So don't miss next week's.
So with that said, Gamma has just changed their motto from never stop playing to
play to live, live to play.
And ours, don't forget it, pickleball is joy.
Don't let anyone tell you differently.
We out.
This pickleball life.